Every person who uses our highways or our mass transit system counts. Everyone who relies on our government, federal, state, and local to be there when a natural disaster strike counts.
They'd like to pretend that everyone here is entitled to certain government carve-outs and benefits. And of course, non-citizens aren't entitled to a lot of benefits.
California's Attorney General and Orange County Supervisor Sean Nelson with sharply different views on whether the 2020 census should ask people if they are U.S. citizens. And we're back now with the panel. Well, Marie, let me start with you. Why do you think the Trump administration has decided to ask this as a general question on the census for the first time since 1950?
Well, it's hard to know their motivation. I know what they've said. But for many Americans, including myself, I see this decision in the context of the divisive rhetoric about immigration, in the context of more hardline policies on deportation. And that's how, most importantly, Americans and people living in the country are seeing it. So the point of the census is to take account of everyone in the country, not just citizens. And there are many people on both sides of the aisle who firmly believe that this question will depress turnout and that we will not get an accurate count because people are scared of what the Trump administration might do with that information.
Jillian, do you think that's true, that this is a conscious effort to try to depress voter or response by people to the census with the express effort of trying to lower the amount of money that's spent on federal benefits, the apportionment of congressional seats, particularly to areas with large numbers of illegal immigrants, which tend to be Democratic?
Well, that is certainly the political argument to be made about this issue. But there is, in fact, in addition to this, a much larger context at stake that gets a little bit more to the fundamentals of American democracy and how our representatives in Congress and elsewhere represent us. Meaning the question, and this is something the Supreme Court took up as recently as 2016, should congressional representatives represent equal numbers of voters in different districts, or should they represent equal number of people? In that case, the case was called, I wrote it down, said, remember, Evenwell versus Abbott. In that instance, they decided that folks who are not citizens have as much equity and should have as much say in these policy decisions as people who are American citizens. That was that decision.
Yeah, now that apparently, and I'm just learning about that this morning, apparently that was a decision that was more to the states and localities than it was to Congress. So the question as to whether congressional seats should be apportioned according to people or citizens, I have to say, I was shocked to learn that it might be people and not citizens.
Well, I was the same, considering that, you know, American members of Congress are supposed to represent the American electorate, not just everybody who, I thought, you know, common parlance, what we're taught in school. It seems that there's a fair argument to be made for they should also be representing the interests of non-citizens. That's a bigger question than I just
Let's bring the one member of Congress that's sitting at this table.
That's ridiculous to think that we're going to have people that aren't Americans, that they are going to influence the vote so that California gets more.
But you're aware that's how it's worked up till now because there's been no citizenship question.
I'm just saying, as a fundamental principle, I think that's wrong. Now, the census is going to count everybody. We're having a national debate about DACA, about immigration reform. Shouldn't we know how many people are here illegally? Of course we're going to count everybody, but we ought to know. By the way, the biggest problem that's moving forward with the census isn't this question, and it will be on there. There's no way for the Democrats to get it off. The biggest problem with the census is that they're going to try to do this over the internet and through electronic machines. What could possibly go wrong, Chris?
Catherine, the debate inside the White House about this, and you know, it just seemed to come out of nowhere with Secretary of Commerce Ross announcing it this week. Had there been a lot of discussion about adding this question?
I know that Secretary Ross pointed to concerns about appropriately dealing with the Voting Rights Act. So that's kind of the argument that's being made from the administration as to why this is important. But I think also we know that all these legal challenges are already happening. A number of states are going to challenge this, and it's not clear how quickly this will be resolved. I mean, so some people are saying that it's possible that this question may not end up on the census if it gets tied up for so long in the courts. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
Meanwhile, President Trump has been on a tear this week about Amazon. And here is one of his tweets to give you a sense of what he's been talking about. They, Amazon, pay little or no taxes to state and local governments, use our postal system as their delivery boy, causing tremendous loss to the U.S., and are putting many thousands of retailers out of business. Congressman Chaffetz, as the former chair of the House Oversight Committee, you dealt with some of these issues. Is President Trump right or wrong?
You know, I've been fond of the president and his policies, but he is fundamentally wrong on this issue, and I actually think he knows he's wrong on this issue. The problems at the post office are rooted in the decline in first-class mail, their pension issues, and how they account for their medical costs. The fact that they have more customers in Amazon is a blessing, and it is a good thing to the Postal Service. You look at UPS, FedEx, Amazon, they all use the Postal Service, and you need them to actually boost up the numbers that are coming in to the post office. So it is a good thing. I know that there is a personal conflict between the president and Mr. Bezos, and that's rooted in his acquisition of the Washington Post, but you need more customers at the post office, not less.
And what about this question of taxes? Because I know it was true in the past that a lot of the big box brick and mortar retailers were upset that sales over the internet, they didn't collect sales tax, but in fact Amazon has, I think, is collecting sales tax in 45 states.
It's all rooted in do you or do you not have physical presence in these states, but quite contrary to what the president has said, Amazon has been helping to lead the charge because it's in their best economic future to have sales tax collected in these states. The Remote Transaction Parity Act, which I helped sponsor, has broad bipartisan support in both bodies, in the House and the Senate, and that says that the states would get to make this determination. So Amazon is paying quite a bit of taxes, more than they paid before, and they want each of the states to be able to make these types of decisions. A very conservative viewpoint.
Catherine, why is the president so focused on Amazon right now? And is it just tweets, or is there talk in the White House of really taking action to move against Amazon?
Well, the White House said this week there were no specific policies on the table at this time. So, with the obvious caveats that the president sometimes makes policy without telling anyone, as of right now, they don't appear to be signaling anything. But he does, as the congressman said, this is something that's rooted both for him, I think, in sort of policy and politics, but also it's personal. And he does find the fact that Jeff Bezos, Amazon's founder, owns the Post deeply frustrating. Now, the Post has been very clear Bezos is not involved in journalistic decisions, but the president does seem to lash out, particularly if he's frustrated by news coverage.
Marie, let me ask you, because this is part of a bigger story, which is that there is a backlash against big tech, and we see it particularly with Facebook and the role that they played with the Russian ads, the role that they played with Cambridge Analytica and turning over information. What are your thoughts about why the president is targeting not tech as an industry, but targeting Amazon and Jeff Bezos, and specifically talking about Bezos using the Washington Post to lobby for his interests here in D.C.?
Well, Catherine's right. This is personal for the president, and we see him use his Twitter feed to sort of hash out personal issues that he has, whether it's with the Washington Post and Jeff Bezos. This is sort of his inner monologue being made public, right? But I think that he hasn't, or his administration, even more importantly, hasn't really looked at these bigger issues of tech. There actually could be some good work if they stepped back from the personal and said, how should we regulate Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Google, all of these different platforms? There's a huge conversation we're having in our country about tech right now, and the president's playing out some personal game on Twitter, which is frustrating to a lot of people.
I've got less than a minute left, Jillian, and while there certainly seems to be something between President Trump and Jeff Bezos, there is also a policy question here, which is that the success of these internet companies does hurt the big box retailers in the street.
That's it, yes. And that's it. I think to the president, this is about the U.S. government, the Postal Service versus Amazon, and he's weighing in and putting his finger on the scale in favor of the Postal Service. But to the tech sector and to the rest of America, this is about the future of brick and mortar in retail. And what happens if a player like Amazon is forced to bear out some of the consequences that the president would like to see happen. You can't put the cat back in the box, and you can't You can't move America away from the future of online retail.